breaking. President Trump issued a fresh warning to Venezuela, telling President Maduro not to play tough, saying it could be the last time, as military tension continues to rise across the Caribbean. And that warning did not come out of nowhere. At 5 local time, before most people were awake, something already dangerous was unfolding. 6 small unmanned aircraft lifted off from Venezuela's northern coast, flying low over dark water, heading northwest toward a US-forward airbase in the Caribbean. Their altitude stayed under 150 feet, speed steady at around 120 miles per hour. No radio signals, no lights. Inside the base, radar screens changed fast. 6 contacts appeared almost at the same moment, spreading slightly, not flying in a straight line. This was not random. This was planned. The base was not empty. On the ground, inside a semi-hardened shelter, sat a US B-21 Raider bomber. Engines were off, but the aircraft was still warm from a recent mission. Maintenance crews had just started routine checks. This was a short window, a vulnerable one. Instead of turning away, the drones adjusted course and pointed directly at the base. They did not slow down, they did not climb, they committed. Alarms sounded, distance dropped fast, less than 10 miles, then 8. This was no accident. This was a deliberate challenge, and whoever launched those drones clearly believed the US would hesitate. They were about to find out how wrong that assumption was. What happened next matters far beyond those 6 drones and 1 airbase. This part of the Caribbean is not just water and coastline. It is one of the most watched military zones in the region. Radar coverage runs day and night. Patrol aircraft pass through on fixed schedules. Every movement is logged, tracked, and analyzed. Nothing is supposed to slip through unnoticed. That is exactly why this moment stands out. The base those drones were flying toward was not chosen by chance. Forward air bases exist to shorten response time. They allow the US to move fast, strike fast, and leave before anyone can react. But speed comes with risk. When aircraft return, when engines cool down, when crews step in for maintenance, even the most advanced systems rely on layers of defense working perfectly. The B-21 Raider sitting on that ramp represented more than a single aircraft. It represented reach, deterrence, the idea that certain assets are simply untouchable. On the ground, however, even symbols of power have limits. For the people working that shift, this was not about politics. It was not about speeches or warnings. It was about seconds. About whether alarms would lead to action fast enough. About whether systems designed for missiles and jets could adapt to cheap drones flying low and quiet. From Venezuela's side, this was not a random strike. It was a test, a probe, a message aimed directly at US confidence and response speed. They were not trying to win a war. They were trying to see how close they could get before being stopped. And here is the real question this moment raises. If low-cost drones can reach this far, this quietly, what does that say about the next move? If you think the US response will shut this down completely, press 1. If you think this confrontation is only getting started, press 9. Because the first response was already underway. Inside the operations room, the mood changed in seconds. On the main radar screen, 6 small contacts moved from the outer edge into the inner tracking ring. Green symbols turned yellow, then red. That color shift meant one thing. These were not weather returns. These were real objects, flying with intent. A radar technician leaned closer to his screen and spoke quietly. They're staying low, under 200 feet. That detail mattered. Low altitude meant clutter, sea spray, shoreline reflections, small targets hiding inside noise. Still, procedures were procedures. The base defense commander gave the order. Engage outer layer. Missile crews moved without hesitation. The system selected the 2 most obvious targets first, the ones climbing slightly higher than the rest. Launch authorization came through. A short tone sounded. 2 interceptors left their rails and climbed hard into the dark sky. For the first few seconds, everything looked normal. Then the drones reacted. The 2 lead drones suddenly pitched down, diving fast toward the surface, trading altitude for speed. On the radar screen, their tracks bent sharply. The interceptors tried to follow, pulling hard turns they were never meant to make at that height. "Track instability," someone said. The radar picture filled with noise. The missile's guidance struggled to separate drone from background. Water, buildings, metal structures along the coast. Everything reflected something. 12 seconds after seeker activation, both interceptors lost lock. Safety systems kicked in. Two bright flashes lit the horizon as the missile self-destructed. No one cheered, no one spoke. Almost immediately, attention shifted to the remaining 4 contacts. 2 had dropped even lower and were no longer clearly visible. The other 2 were doing something unexpected. Instead of avoiding the defense zone, they were flying straight toward it. "That doesn't make sense," the commander said. But the range numbers told the story. The drones were closing fast, inside a mile, then closer. Missile systems hesitated. Minimum engagement limits came into play. Too close to fire safely, too little time to adjust. On the screen, the drones crossed into a space where the system could no longer respond. At that moment, the base realized something critical. The first line of defense was already compromised, and the drones were still coming. The fight did not slow down, it spread. With the outer defense disrupted, control shifted inward. Systems that were never meant to carry the full load suddenly had to do exactly that. Tracking responsibilities overlapped. Screens refreshed faster. Voices tightened. The 2 drones flying straight at the defense line forced a rapid decision. Missiles were no longer an option. The engagement window had collapsed. What remained were sensors, timing, and human judgment. Meanwhile, the other pair became the real problem. They slipped south and then slightly west, hugging the terrain. At low altitude, radar coverage was never perfect. Coastal buildings rose and fell. Small hills blocked lines of sight. A narrow blind zone opened where signals weakened just enough to lose clean tracking. For several long seconds, those 2 drones were not visible at all. "No contact," the radar operator said. He adjusted gain, recentered the sweep. Still nothing. In close combat, every angle counts. Even a small change in height can mean survival. Those drones stayed low and steady, moving through a space the system could not clearly see. Inside the base, the pressure grew heavier. The B-21 sat silent inside its shelter. Panels were open, support equipment surrounded it. Moving the aircraft now would take time they no longer had. Then the missing contacts reappeared. Not where anyone expected. They came back on screen closer than projected, faster than planned, slipping past a coverage seam that only existed for a few hundred yards. It was enough. Secondary defenses tried to lock. The tracking solution lagged. The computer needed more time to separate targets, crossing paths, and changing speed. No sound but the ocean drifted through the room for a brief moment. Then alarms returned, sharper than before. Multiple inbound, low altitude. Someone called out. Point defense units spun up. Crews rushed through steps normally done slowly and carefully. Systems were brought online before full stabilization. Accuracy dropped, but waiting was no longer an option. The engagement zone shrank again. Distance closed to seconds, not miles. What had started as 6 small contacts was now a full saturation problem. Too many targets, too little time, too many systems forced to work outside their comfort zone. And through it all, the drones kept coming. Up to this point, the base believed the danger was coming head-on. That assumption was wrong. What no one saw at first was the pattern hidden inside the chaos. The drones were not acting independently. They were shaping attention, pulling radar focus, forcing systems to chase the loudest, most obvious threats. The 2 drones that had vanished earlier were never retreating. They were sliding sideways through a narrow slice of air the sensors barely covered. A seam created by terrain, structures, and physics. It was small. It existed for seconds at a time. But it was enough. When they reappeared, they did so closer than expected. Much closer. At the same moment, the pair flying directly at the defenses did something that broke every assumption. Instead of turning away, they accelerated. Straight in, closing distance fast. This was not bravery. It was calculation. Every defensive system has limits, minimum range, safety buffers, rules designed to protect crews and equipment. Inside those limits, weapons hesitate, computers pause, protocols override instinct. The drones crossed that invisible line. Missile systems could not fire without risking self-damage. Automated responses shut down. Human operators hesitated for fractions of a second that now mattered more than ever. That hesitation created space. Inside the shelter, crews working around the B-21 did not know any of this yet. They heard alarms. They felt the tension, but they did not know that the outer logic of the defense had already been cracked. This was the real twist. The attack was never about speed alone. It was about forcing the US defense to obey its own rules at the worst possible moment. If you think the drones should have been stopped already, press 1. If you think this twist changed everything, press 9. Because the final phase was about to begin. The final moments moved faster than anyone expected. Point defense crews were still rushing through setup steps that were never meant to be rushed. Systems were live, but not fully stable. Tracking was rough. Every vibration mattered. "Contacts inside 2 miles," a voice called out. The first defensive missile launched anyway. It left the rail clean, then drifted slightly off course. The platform had not fully settled. Guidance corrected late. The missile detonated harmlessly in the air. Gun systems took over. Rounds filled the sky, bright lines cutting across the darkness as cannons fired in long bursts. The noise shook the ground. Spent casings hit the pavement. But the drones did not fly straight. They dipped. They climbed. They shifted left, then right, never holding a steady path long enough to be predictable. One drone took a hit. It broke apart and fell short of the base, exploding in a brief flash beyond the perimeter fence. 2 others kept going. Inside the shelter, a technician looked up from his console. "They're too close," he said. A short radio call followed. "Inbound, less than 10 seconds." The lead drone came in low, then pulled up slightly at the last moment. Its angle steepened as it crossed the fence line. Speed jumped past 130 miles per hour. There was no warning siren now, no time. The impact was sharp, not loud. A flash, a punch of pressure. The shaped charge focused inward, cutting through the aircraft's outer skin and into areas never meant to be exposed. Fuel ignited instantly. For a brief second, the shelter was silent. Then fire rushed outward. Heat rolled across the ramp. The B-21 Raider was engulfed before anyone could react. Systems shut down. Power failed. The aircraft never moved. The second drone struck nearby support equipment moments later. The blast damaged sensors and blinded what remained of the point defense system. By the time the smoke began to lift, the fight was over. The base still stood. The crews were alive, but one of the US most advanced aircraft was gone. And everyone there understood the same thing at the same time. This had crossed a line. When the smoke finally cleared, the scale of what had just happened became impossible to ignore. The base remained operational. No pilots were lost. Crews escaped with minor injuries, but the damage on the ramp told a different story. One B-21 Raider, an aircraft designed to survive the most hostile airspace on Earth, had been destroyed without ever leaving the ground. This was not a battlefield loss in the traditional sense. It was a lesson. The attack exposed something uncomfortable. Modern air power depends not only on stealth and speed, but on timing, routines, and systems that assume order. When that order breaks, even the most advanced platforms become vulnerable for short moments. And short moments are all drones need. For the US military, this incident will trigger reviews, changes, and new layers of protection. Procedures will be rewritten, defenses tightened. But none of that erases the signal sent that morning. For Venezuela, the message was just as clear. They demonstrated that they could reach out, force a response, and shape headlines far beyond their borders. Not by matching power, but by exploiting gaps. This was not about winning a war. It was about testing limits, measuring reactions, pushing boundaries one step at a time. The bigger question now is what happens next? Does this stop here, or does it invite a response that raises the stakes even higher? If you believe this strike will force the US to hit back hard and fast, press 1. If you think both sides are entering a longer, more dangerous game, press 9. Because what happened on that runway may only be the beginning